I never thought my 62nd birthday would begin with a secret note that nearly stopped my heart. One moment I was raising my glass for a toast, and the next I was staring at words scrawled in hurried handwriting. Don't drink that. Your life is in danger. In that instant, the laughter, the golden light of the restaurant, even the warmth of my son's smile, all of it faded into a chilling silence only I could hear. My name is Evelyn Harper, and on that Friday night in Atlanta, I came closer than ever to death at the hands of someone I had welcomed into my family. The celebration had started innocently enough. My son, David Harper, wanted to honor me at Giovanni's Trattoria, the Italian restaurant I had loved for years. The tables glowed beneath soft lanterns, the air filled with garlic and basil, and I remember thinking how perfect it all felt. David's wife, Vanessa Reed, sat across from me, her smile poised but never quite warm. At the time, I brushed it off as nerves. I shouldn't have. David poured the wine, California Cabernet, bold and rich, and raised his glass. "To Mom," he said, voice heavy with affection, "the strongest woman I know." The words made my chest ache with pride. Vanessa echoed him, her tone clipped, her hand trembling ever so slightly. Then came the moment, the flick of a wrist, the subtle slip of a folded paper onto my plate by a passing waitress, a young woman whose eyes carried urgency. Her name, I would later learn, was Naomi Carter. Beneath the table, I unfolded the note. My blood ran cold. "Don't drink that." I looked up, trying to mask the terror pounding in my veins. David chatted on, unaware. Vanessa's eyes flicked between me and my glass with a tension I couldn't ignore. I forced myself to smile, even as a war raged inside me. In that second, I made a choice that would change everything. When David turned to call for more bread, I slid my glass across the table and switched it with Vanessa's. My hands trembled, but my face remained calm. And 5 minutes later, as Vanessa's skin turned pale and her body began to shake, I realized the truth I never wanted to believe. My life had been marked for betrayal from within my own family. The first sign was subtle, a fleeting grimace across Vanessa Reed's face as she pressed a hand against her stomach. At first, I thought maybe she had eaten too quickly, or perhaps the Caesar salad had disagreed with her. But within seconds, that discomfort sharpened into something terrifying. Her complexion drained to a chalky gray, and her hands began to tremble in a way that could not be dismissed. I don't feel well," she whispered, her voice cracking as beads of sweat rolled down her forehead. Across the table, David immediately leaned forward, concern etching every line of his face. "Vanessa, what's wrong? Talk to me." His voice carried urgency, but beneath it I could hear fear. The restaurant's hum of conversation faltered as nearby diners sensed the unfolding crisis. Chairs scraped against the wooden floor, waiters froze mid-step, and the warmth of celebration shattered like glass dropped onto stone. "Call 911, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. My hands trembled beneath the tablecloth, still clutching the folded note from Naomi Carter, the stranger who had just saved my life. The words "don't drink" that pulsed in my mind like a drumbeat. Vanessa tried to stand, but her legs buckled beneath her. David caught her before she hit the ground, his eyes wild with panic. "Somebody help us," he shouted. Within minutes, the restaurant descended into chaos. A manager rushed over with a first aid kit, though his hands shook as he tried to remember the steps of CPR training. Other diners stood back, some whispering, others frozen in horrified fascination. I sat in my chair, paralyzed by a truth too heavy to name. That poison meant for me was now tearing through the veins of the woman who had smiled at me only moments earlier. When the paramedics burst through the doors, time seemed to warp. Their uniforms, their clipped commands, their medical bags, they all felt surreal, like I was trapped in a movie I hadn't auditioned for. Female, mid-30s, unconscious, rapid pulse, labored breathing, one EMT rattled off as they lowered Vanessa onto a stretcher. David clutched my arm. "Mom, what's happening? She was fine a minute ago." His voice was ragged, desperate. I couldn't answer. Not yet. The note still burned in my pocket, but I knew the moment I revealed it, our family would never be the same. The ride to St. Jude Medical Center was a blur of sirens and flashing lights. I sat in the back of the ambulance, gripping David's hand while paramedics worked furiously over Vanessa. Oxygen mask secured, IV fluids flowing, monitors beeping. It was a scene of controlled chaos. My heart raced, but not out of sympathy alone. It was terror, because I knew the poison wasn't an accident. It had been meant for me. Inside the emergency room, sterile fluorescent light replaced the warm glow of Giovanni's. The air reeked of antiseptic, a cold reminder that joy had been replaced by danger. Doctors and nurses whisked Vanessa behind double doors, leaving David and me in the purgatory of plastic waiting chairs. "I don't understand," David muttered, burying his head in his hands. "She was fine earlier. Maybe it's food poisoning, maybe something in the wine." His voice trailed, clinging to any explanation that sounded less monstrous than the truth. I glanced at the note once more, hidden in my lap. My throat tightened. Should I tell him now? Would he believe me? The look in Vanessa's eyes when she raised her glass replayed in my memory, the faint tremor in her hands, the way her gaze flicked between my face and the wine. She had been waiting for me to take that sip. Hours bled together under the harsh hospital lights. At last, a young doctor with a neat beard approached us. His expression was grave, the kind that prepares families for truths they don't want to hear. "Mr. Harper," he asked, looking at David, "your wife is stable for the moment, but the situation is serious." David's voice cracked. "What happened to her?" The doctor hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "The blood tests show extremely high levels of digoxin in her system. It's a heart medication, safe in small, prescribed doses, but the concentration we found is toxic, potentially lethal." I inhaled sharply, my suspicions confirmed. The note hadn't been paranoia, it had been salvation. "Are you saying someone poisoned her?" My voice trembled despite my effort to sound calm. The doctor's gaze hardened. "What I can tell you is this: the amount in her body did not enter by accident. We'll need to notify the authorities." David stood, pacing the cramped room. "This can't be real. No one would want to hurt Vanessa. Who would do something like that?" His words stabbed at me because deep inside I already knew the answer, but I couldn't speak it. Not yet. Instead, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folded slip of paper. My hands shook as I unfolded it, revealing the scrawled message to my son. "David," I whispered, pressing it into his hands. "Read this." He scanned the words, his face draining of color. "Where did you get this?" So I told him about the waitress with urgent eyes, the paper slip beside my plate, the decision to switch glasses. With every word, I watched his world unravel. His knees buckled, and he sank into the chair. "Are you saying," his voice cracked, "are you saying someone tried to poison you?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," I replied, my voice low but firm, even as my insides trembled. The doctor nodded grimly. "We'll have to involve the police right away." As he walked away, I caught David's eyes. They were wide, frightened, and full of dawning realization. He wanted to deny it, but the truth was there in black and white, written on a waitress's hurried note. The danger hadn't been random. It had been planned. And the person who wanted me dead might already be sitting across our family table. The waiting room of St. Jude Medical Center was never meant for comfort. Plastic chairs, buzzing fluorescent lights, and the faint odor of disinfectant made every minute stretch into an eternity. David sat slumped forward, elbows on his knees, his hands pressed against his forehead. I could see the storm raging inside him, but there were no words to soothe it. Not now. The door swung open with a metallic groan, and a tall woman in a dark blazer stepped in. Her badge flashed as she introduced herself. "Detective Clara Mitchell, Atlanta Police Department. I need to ask a few questions." David stood instantly. "Detective, is my wife?" "She's stable," the detective cut in smoothly. "But your wife's condition suggests foul play. The doctors found digoxin in her system at a level consistent with intentional poisoning. We're treating this as a criminal investigation." Her eyes swept from David to me, sharp and probing. "I understand you were both present at the restaurant?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady, though my pulse thundered in my ears. "We were celebrating my birthday." Detective Mitchell opened a notebook. And when did she begin showing symptoms? Minutes after the wine was poured, I replied. At first, just discomfort. Then she collapsed. David interjected quickly. But it has to be a mistake. Vanessa doesn't even take heart medicine. She's perfectly healthy. Maybe someone mixed up her drink? I hesitated, then reached into my purse and pulled out the folded paper once more. Detective, before she collapsed, I received this. Mitchell took the note carefully, scanning the uneven handwriting. Her brows furrowed. Who gave this to you? A waitress, I explained. Young, maybe 21 or 22. She slipped it onto my plate without a word. Later, I learned her name is Naomi Carter. She's a student at Emory, working part-time. The detective tapped her pen against the notepad. We'll need to speak with her immediately. David shook his head, still reeling. This doesn't make sense. Who would want to poison my wife? Detective Mitchell fixed him with a look that was both compassionate and unyielding. Mr. Harper, I'm afraid the more relevant question might be, who was the intended target? Her gaze flicked toward me. The words hung in the air like smoke. David's face blanched. No, that can't be. But in my heart, I knew she was right. Vanessa hadn't been the victim that night. She had been the stand-in. As the detective made her notes, fragments of memory clawed their way back to me. Over the past few months, I had brushed off moments that now screamed for attention. I remembered the herbal tea Vanessa brought me on Sunday afternoons, insisting it would calm my nerves, the metallic aftertaste that lingered on my tongue, the strange bouts of dizziness that had begun not long after. I recalled how she had grown more insistent about my forgetfulness, whispering to David that perhaps I was showing early signs of dementia. At the time, I chalked it up to her youthful arrogance, her tendency to exaggerate. But now those comments formed a chilling narrative. She hadn't been preparing to care for me. She had been preparing the world to doubt me. Detective Mitchell noticed my silence. Mrs. Harper, is there something you're remembering? I swallowed hard. There were signs, subtle things. She insisted I was forgetful. She gave me drinks that made me feel strange. She even suggested once that maybe I should consider moving into assisted living. My voice caught on the words. David jerked upright. She said that? His eyes darted between us, a storm brewing. I thought she was just worried about you being alone. I didn't. You didn't want to see it, I said gently, though the truth cut deep. The detective scribbled furiously. This aligns with patterns we've seen in similar cases. Build a narrative of declining health, isolate the victim, gain control of finances. David's face twisted in anguish. No, Vanessa wouldn't. She loves me. She loves us. But even as he spoke, doubt crept into his voice. He replayed the details I had given, layering them against his own memories. Vanessa's insistence on handling the bills, her eagerness to have him sign papers he barely read, the way she had pushed him to discuss power of attorney after my husband's funeral. He slumped back into the chair, pale and shaking. Oh God. Detective Mitchell closed her notebook with a snap. We'll need to secure evidence. Bank records, internet searches, any medication in your home. Mr. Harper, I advise you not to speak with your wife until we've gathered everything. David looked as though the floor had vanished beneath him. Detective, if what you're saying is true, then my wife tried to kill my mother. His voice broke on the last word. I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. David, listen to me. None of this changes who you are. It only reveals who she is, and you need to face it. He gripped my hand like a lifeline, his eyes wet. I don't know if I can. You can, I said firmly, because the alternative is losing me, and that is something you cannot allow. The detective stood. I'll arrange for officers to interview Naomi Carter tonight. Her testimony may be the key to unraveling this. She slipped the note into an evidence bag. This is attempted murder, Mrs. Harper, and it's only the beginning. As she walked away, David sat motionless, the truth finally sinking into his bones. The woman he had trusted, the woman he had loved, had not only betrayed him, she had nearly killed his mother. The interrogation room at the Atlanta precinct was stark and unforgiving. Gray walls, a metal table, 2 chairs bolted to the floor. Naomi Carter sat nervously, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Despite her youth, her eyes carried the weight of something far older, grief mixed with determination. Detective Clara Mitchell slid into the seat opposite her, voice calm yet edged with steel. "Naomi, I need you to start at the beginning. Tell me why you slipped that note to Evelyn Harper." Naomi exhaled shakily. "Because I recognized her. Not Mrs. Harper, Vanessa. I knew her face the moment I saw her. She's the same woman who cared for my grandmother before she died. Back then, she went by a different name, Vanessa Collins." Detective Mitchell raised an eyebrow. "And you're certain?" "Absolutely," Naomi replied. "I'll never forget her. She smiled the same way, that cold, tight smile that never reached her eyes. I always felt something off about her, but no one believed me." Evelyn and David were seated behind a one-way mirror watching. Evelyn's heart clenched at the young woman's courage. David leaned forward, his jaw taut. "God," he whispered. "Vanessa lied about her name, her past, everything." Inside the room, Naomi continued. "My grandmother, Martha Johnson, was 78 when she met Vanessa. She was still sharp, independent. She managed her garden, her bills, everything. But then, Vanessa entered her life." Detective Mitchell's pen scratched against her notebook. "How?" "She met Grandma at the grocery store. Grandma had dropped a bag of apples, and Vanessa rushed to help. She introduced herself as a certified nursing assistant, said she loved helping older people. My family thought she was an angel. She started visiting, bringing meals, offering to clean, helping with errands. At first, it was wonderful." Naomi's voice faltered, but she pressed on. "Then came the little comments. She told us Grandma had repeated the same story twice in one afternoon. She hinted that Grandma forgot to lock her door. She made us question things we never noticed before." Detective Mitchell nodded. "So she planted the idea of cognitive decline." "Yes," Naomi said bitterly. "And it worked. We began to doubt Grandma. And the more we doubted, the more power Vanessa had. She convinced my parents that Grandma needed professional care, a place where she'd be safe. She even had brochures ready, expensive facilities that specialized in dementia." Naomi's eyes glistened with unshed tears. But Grandma wasn't confused. She told me in private that she remembered everything clearly. She said Vanessa always gave her vitamins, tiny white pills that made her feel weak. She begged me not to worry, said maybe she was just tired. I should have done more. I should have taken those pills and tested them. Detective Mitchell leaned forward. "Naomi, what happened in the end?" Naomi's voice cracked. "Within 6 months, Grandma was dead. Heart failure, they said. The doctors wrote it off as natural, but I knew it wasn't natural. She never had heart problems before Vanessa came." Behind the glass, Evelyn's breath caught. The parallels were undeniable. The tea, the comments about forgetfulness, the push toward assisted living, it was the same script, just with a different victim. David covered his face with his hands. "She's done this before," he muttered. "Oh God, she's a predator, and I brought her into our lives." Evelyn placed a trembling hand on his arm. "David, don't take this on yourself. She fooled everyone, even Naomi's family." Back in the room, Detective Mitchell spoke carefully. "Naomi, why didn't you go to the police sooner?" "I tried," Naomi whispered. "I told them. I begged them to investigate. But I was 19, just a grieving granddaughter with no proof. They said elderly people die all the time, that dementia leads to complications. No one wanted to listen." She looked up, her eyes blazing. "So when I saw Vanessa again, laughing at a restaurant, pouring wine for another family, I couldn't stay silent. I had to act." Detective Mitchell's expression softened. "You may have saved Mrs. Harper's life." The detective slid the note into an evidence bag. "Naomi, your testimony is critical, but we'll need more. Records, prescriptions, financial documents from when Vanessa cared for your grandmother. Do you still have any of that?" Naomi nodded quickly. "Yes, I kept everything. Her journals, receipts, even the tea bags she left behind. I didn't know why I couldn't throw them away, maybe because part of me knew I'd need them someday." Detective Mitchell allowed herself a tight smile. "Good instinct. We'll analyze everything." Naomi clenched her fists. "Detective, I need you to promise me something. Promise me she won't get away this time. Promise me my grandmother won't have died for nothing." Mitchell's voice was steady as granite. "I can't promise outcomes, Naomi, but I can promise you this. I will not stop until the truth comes out." From behind the glass, Evelyn felt tears burning her eyes. For the first time since that night at the restaurant, she felt something other than fear. She felt hope. When Naomi left the room, Evelyn and David were brought in. Detective Mitchell set the evidence bag on the table. "Now you see the pattern," she said firmly. "This isn't random. Vanessa didn't just decide one night to poison a drink. She's been perfecting this for years." David's voice was hoarse. "So, my wife is a serial predator." The detective met his eyes. "Yes, and with Naomi's testimony, the medical evidence, and what we find in your home, we can build a case strong enough to put her away for life." Evelyn reached across the table, gripping David's hand. "Son, this is not the end. This is the beginning of us reclaiming our lives." David nodded slowly, though his eyes brimmed with tears. "I'll help you, Mom, no matter what it takes." For the first time, Evelyn saw not the broken boy wrestling with guilt, but a man ready to fight for justice. The battle against Vanessa had only begun, but they were no longer fighting alone. The Harper residence had always been a place of warmth for me. Sunday dinners, laughter echoing through the kitchen, family photos on the mantel. But that night, when Detective Clara Mitchell led her team through the front door with a search warrant in hand, the house felt alien, tainted by deception. David followed close behind, his face pale as if he were walking into a nightmare. "I don't understand," he whispered. "This is our home. How could she hide something here?" Detective Mitchell's eyes were sharp. "People like Vanessa thrive on normalcy, Mr. Harper. They hide their darkest secrets in plain sight." Officers spread out with flashlights and evidence bags. The sound of drawers opening, paper rustling, and boxes shifting filled the silence. Every creak of the floorboards seemed to echo like an accusation. The first discovery came from the bedroom Vanessa shared with David. An officer emerged holding a shoebox filled with amber pill bottles. He placed it on the dining table under a harsh overhead light. "Detective," he said, "none of these are prescribed to Mr. or Mrs. Harper." Mitchell pulled on gloves and inspected the labels. Digoxin, beta blockers, diuretics, medications for cardiac patients. Yet David and Evelyn had no history of heart conditions. David's knees buckled. He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "My God, she kept them here, right under my nose." Evelyn's throat tightened as she stared at the bottles. "That's what she was giving me. In my tea, in the food she brought." Detective Mitchell looked grim. "This is direct evidence of intent." She ordered the officer to photograph and catalog every pill bottle. Another officer called out from the study, "Detective, you need to see this." We followed into the small room David used for bills and paperwork. On the desk lay a neat folder labeled estate planning in Vanessa's handwriting. Inside were copies of legal forms, partially filled out, requesting power of attorney over Evelyn's finances. David's face drained of color. "She told me these were drafts recommended by an attorney. She said Mom had already agreed in principle." His voice cracked. "I almost signed them." Detective Mitchell flipped through the papers. These aren't just drafts. She had dates marked for filing. This was weeks away from being executed. Evelyn felt a chill creep up her spine. She wanted me declared incompetent. Once she had control, she would have had everything. My money, my home, even my choices. David clenched his fists, tears brimming in his eyes. "She wanted to erase you, Mom, piece by piece." In the guest bedroom closet, officers unearthed a box stuffed with printouts, online searches carefully highlighted. The titles were enough to freeze the blood. How to induce dementia-like symptoms, poisons that mimic natural causes, best assisted living facilities for dementia patients in Atlanta, how to gain control of elderly parent finances legally. Detective Mitchell laid them out on the bed like grotesque trophies. She wasn't improvising. She was building a playbook. David stared in horror. She used Dad's death against me. She knew how scared I was of losing Mom to dementia the same way. She exploited every fear I had. Evelyn touched his arm gently. Son, you weren't blind. You were manipulated. She crafted this plan to make you believe it was your idea. The most chilling discovery came last. In Vanessa's nightstand, officers found a leather-bound journal. The handwriting was precise, almost elegant, but the words were monstrous. E is showing signs of fatigue after tea. Increased dosage slightly. David suspects nothing. He believes she is just aging. Power of attorney in progress. Must push him harder after her next episode. Wine will be the perfect opportunity. Public setting, less suspicion. Evelyn's breath caught in her chest. Each line confirmed what her body had been screaming for months. She hadn't been sick. She had been poisoned. David recoiled from the journal as though it were toxic. She wrote it down. She planned every step. His voice broke into a sob. And I let her. Detective Mitchell's tone was firm. No, Mr. Harper, she deceived you, but this journal is our smoking gun. When the search ended, the dining table was covered with evidence bags, medications, forged documents, financial plans, and the damning journal. Detective Mitchell stood at the head of the table, her presence commanding. This case just shifted. Vanessa Harper didn't just attempt murder. She orchestrated a systematic campaign of psychological and physical abuse with the intent to kill and profit. David sat motionless, his face etched with devastation. Evelyn reached for his hand. We survived this, David, because someone saw through her lies, because truth has a way of breaking through. For the first time, David met her gaze without flinching. I'll testify, Mom. Whatever it takes, she won't hurt you or anyone ever again. Evelyn nodded, though her chest ached with both sorrow and resolve. The battle ahead would be long. Police reports, courtrooms, reliving every wound. But at that moment, surrounded by evidence of betrayal, she knew the most important truth. Vanessa's mask had finally been torn away, and there would be no putting it back on. The hospital corridors smelled of antiseptic and fear. Evelyn's footsteps echoed as Detective Clara Mitchell guided her and David toward the guarded room. Two uniformed officers stood outside the door, their hands resting casually on their holsters, though the weight of the situation was anything but casual. David's face was pale, his jaw tight. He hadn't spoken since leaving the precinct. Evelyn could feel his turmoil, a son torn between loyalty to blood and the ruin of love. Detective Mitchell paused at the door. She regained consciousness this morning. She's been asking for you, both of you. You don't have to go in, Mrs. Harper, but confronting her may give us insight we need. Evelyn straightened her spine. No, I need to see her. I need her to see me, alive. The detective nodded. The officer opened the door. Vanessa lay in the hospital bed, pale but awake, IV lines feeding into her arm. Her hair was matted, her lips dry, but her eyes, sharp, calculating, still glimmered with the same coldness Evelyn remembered. When Vanessa saw them, her expression softened instantly, as if she were slipping into a role she knew by heart. Evelyn, she whispered, her voice fragile. Thank God you're all right. I was so worried. David flinched, torn, but Evelyn stepped forward, her voice steady. Don't pretend. We know the truth. We found the pills, the documents, the journal. For the first time, Vanessa's mask faltered. A shadow crossed her face before she recovered. She forced a brittle laugh. You really think I would hurt you after everything? I loved you like a mother. Evelyn's voice cut like glass. You poisoned me like an enemy. David finally spoke, his voice shaking. Vanessa, why? Why would you do this? Vanessa turned her gaze to him, her eyes wet with false tears. I did it for us, David. Don't you see? Your mother is aging. She would have needed care eventually. I just wanted to make sure we were prepared. Financially, emotionally. I wanted us free. David's face twisted in disbelief. Free? By killing my mother? Vanessa's voice hardened. Don't be naive. Everyone dies, David. I was just moving the timeline forward. With her inheritance, with her estate, we could have had the life we deserved. The words sliced through Evelyn like a blade. Not regret, not love, just greed, cloaked in rationalization. Detective Mitchell, standing quietly near the door, scribbled notes, her expression unreadable. Evelyn stepped closer, her eyes burning into Vanessa's. You made me doubt myself. You whispered lies to my son, made him think I was losing my mind. You stole my strength, my dignity, But you failed. I'm still here, and you're the one lying in that bed. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, her mask slipping completely now. You should be thanking me. Do you know how many old women die alone, forgotten, useless? I was going to give you peace, a dignified end. Evelyn's voice trembled, but not with fear, with rage. No, you were going to give yourself power. You turned compassion into a weapon, and you thought no one would ever catch you. David slammed his fist against the wall. Enough. You manipulated me, Vanessa. You made me believe my mother was sick. You used my fear of losing her like I lost Dad. I see it now. All of it. Vanessa's lips curled into a bitter smile. And you would have thanked me once she was gone. The tension in the room thickened until it was hard to breathe. Evelyn leaned forward, her voice low and sharp. Listen to me. You will never control me again. You will never poison another cup of tea, never forge another document, never ruin another family. You're finished. For the first time, real anger flashed in Vanessa's eyes. Stupid old woman, she hissed. You should have drunk the wine. Do you really think you can walk away from this untouched? I may be in this bed now, but I won't be forever. And people like me, we always find a way. Detective Mitchell stepped forward then, her voice firm. Correction, Mrs. Harper. People like you always end up in prison, and this time, you won't escape. The officer by the door entered, noting Vanessa's outburst. She quickly lowered her gaze, retreating back into silence, but the damage was done. Her own words had betrayed her. Evelyn turned to David. His eyes were glassy, his hands trembling. She placed her hand over his. Do you see now, son? This is who she really is. He nodded slowly, grief etched across his face. Yes, Mom, I see her. As they walked out of the room, Evelyn felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and liberation. The battle was far from over. There would be police reports, trials, testimony, but something fundamental had shifted. Vanessa had finally shown her true self, not just to Evelyn, but to David, the man she had manipulated most. In the quiet hallway, Evelyn drew a deep breath. For the first time in months, she felt light, like shackles had fallen from her spirit. And as Detective Mitchell closed her notebook, she said the words Evelyn had been waiting for. Mrs. Harper, this confrontation may be the key to locking her away for life. Evelyn nodded. Then let's make sure justice is served. The Fulton County Courthouse loomed with solemn authority, its marble steps gleaming in the morning sun. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy, charged with anticipation. Reporters clustered near the entrance, cameras flashing as Evelyn Harper, flanked by her son David and Detective Clara Mitchell, walked in. Naomi Carter followed behind, clutching a folder of documents and evidence she had preserved for years. In courtroom 4B, Vanessa Harper sat at the defense table. She wore a crisp navy suit provided by her attorney, her hair neatly brushed, but nothing could conceal the cold calculation in her eyes. When she looked up and saw Evelyn, she smiled faintly, as though this were just another performance. The bailiff's voice boomed, "All rise." Judge Robert Callahan entered, his expression grave. The room quieted to a tense hush. This court is now in session. The people of the state of Georgia versus Vanessa Harper. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Mariah Torres, rose. She was a woman in her 40s, sharp-eyed and commanding. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today you will hear the story of a woman who weaponized trust. The defendant, Vanessa Harper, is charged with attempted murder, fraud, and abuse of the elderly. She sought to poison her mother-in-law, Evelyn Harper, in order to gain control of her estate. And this was not her first attempt. Other victims, including Martha Johnson, fell prey to her manipulations. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Evelyn's hands trembled in her lap, but she sat tall. Vanessa's attorney, a slick man named Gregory Flint, stood when it was his turn. The defense will show that this case is built on assumptions, emotional testimony, and the overzealous theories of a grieving granddaughter. My client is innocent. She was the one hospitalized, not Mrs. Harper. The so-called evidence is circumstantial at best. Vanessa nodded slightly at his words, her mask of calm slipping back into place. The first witness called was Evelyn herself. Slowly, she rose and walked to the stand. Every step felt like walking through fire, but when she sat and took the oath, A surge of strength steadied her. "Mrs. Harper," Ada Torres began gently, "can you tell the court what happened the night of your birthday dinner at Giovanni's Trattoria?" Evelyn's voice was firm, though her hands gripped the edges of the witness stand. She described the toast, the folded note slipped to her plate, the chilling words, "Don't drink that." She explained how she switched glasses with Vanessa, and how minutes later her daughter-in-law collapsed. The jury leaned forward, hanging on every word. "And what happened after?" "At the hospital," Evelyn said, her eyes fixed on Vanessa, "they told us she had digoxin in her system. Later, the police found pills, forged legal papers, and a journal in her home, plans to declare me incompetent and seize my estate." Vanessa shifted uncomfortably, her jaw tight. Next came Naomi Carter. The young woman's voice shook at first, but as she told the story of her grandmother, Martha Johnson, her words gained strength. She described how Vanessa, under another name, entered their lives, sowed seeds of doubt, and ultimately left Martha dead. The courtroom was silent except for Naomi's steady voice. "I couldn't save my grandmother, but when I saw Vanessa again, I couldn't let another family suffer. That's why I wrote the note." The prosecutor laid out the physical evidence, the medications, the forged papers, the chilling journal entries. Each item was displayed on a projector screen, each detail hammering another nail into Vanessa's defense. By the end of the day, the jury had heard enough to know this was no misunderstanding. This was a pattern, a method, a crime repeated. As Evelyn left the stand, she looked once more at Vanessa. Their eyes met. For the first time, Vanessa's smile was gone. What replaced it was pure, simmering hatred. And Evelyn knew this battle was far from over, but the truth was finally louder than the lies. The courtroom buzzed with low murmurs as the bailiff called for order. Vanessa's attorney, Gregory Flint, adjusted his tie and stood with a flourish. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began smoothly, "you've heard a dramatic story, but stories are not evidence. Mrs. Harper's collapse that night could have been caused by food poisoning, stress, or an undiagnosed condition. The so-called note? Anonymous scribbles from a waitress with a personal vendetta. And these pill bottles, how do we know they weren't planted? My client has been vilified without proof." He paced in front of the jury box. "The prosecution asks you to believe that a woman, an educated, caring daughter-in-law, suddenly transformed into a calculating murderer. It defies logic." Vanessa lifted her chin, her expression almost saintly. Evelyn felt bile rise in her throat at the performance. Ada Torres rose sharply. "Logic?" she shot back. "Let's talk about logic. A shoebox full of unprescribed heart medications hidden in the defendant's bedroom, legal documents pre-filled with her handwriting, internet searches on inducing dementia and disguising poison, a journal documenting dosage experiments. That is not a fairy tale. That is intent." Judge Callahan banged his gavel. "Order." The prosecutor turned toward the defense table. "The state calls David Harper to the stand." The courtroom shifted as David stood. His face was ashen, his hands trembling slightly as he raised his right hand and swore the oath. When he sat, his eyes darted briefly toward Vanessa, then quickly away. "Mr. Harper," Torres began, "can you tell the court about your wife's behavior in the months leading up to the incident?" David's throat tightened, but he forced the words out. "She kept saying my mother was confused, that she was repeating herself, that she might be developing dementia. She showed me articles, studies. I believed her. I thought she was just worried." Torres leaned closer. "And did she suggest legal action?" "Yes," David admitted, his voice heavy with shame. "She pushed me to convince my mother to sign over power of attorney. She said it was the responsible thing to do. She even had papers ready. I didn't see it then, but now I know she was setting everything up." Gasps rippled through the jury box. Flint shot up. "Objection. Speculation." Torres countered swiftly. "Not speculation. Testimony. First-hand accounts of manipulation." The judge overruled. David's words remained. Torres moved closer. "Mr. Harper, did you ever see your wife give your mother food or drink that made her ill?" David hesitated. His memory flashed, Vanessa arriving with soup, Evelyn later pale and dizzy. Tea bags left behind, Evelyn too tired to finish conversations. His stomach churned. Yes, he said finally. There were times when she brought things over, and afterward Mom felt off, but I didn't connect. I thought it was age. I thought. His voice cracked. I was wrong. Across the courtroom, Vanessa's mask slipped for a second. A flicker of fury crossed her face before she smoothed it away. Flint jumped to his feet. Mr. Harper, are you aware that your wife also collapsed that night? That she was hospitalized in critical condition? Why would a woman poison herself? David's jaw tightened. Because the glass wasn't meant for her. The words hung in the air like thunder. Evelyn watched her son with a mix of sorrow and pride. For months he had carried guilt like a chain. Now he was breaking free, piece by speaking truth aloud. Torres seized the moment. The jury has heard it from the victim's own son. The poisoning wasn't an accident. It was targeted. Mrs. Harper was meant to die that night. Flint scoffed. So we're to believe this is all part of some grand scheme? That my client married, lived, and cared for her husband's family just to what? Collect money? Torres's eyes flashed. Yes, that is exactly what we're saying, and the evidence proves it. She displayed Vanessa's journal on the projector. The jury read the chilling words. E is showing signs of fatigue after tea. Increased dosage slightly. Vanessa's composure finally cracked. Her lips pressed into a hard line, her eyes darting wildly as whispers spread through the courtroom. Evelyn leaned forward slightly, her voice barely audible but directed at Vanessa. They see you now. The mask is gone. Vanessa's eyes snapped to hers, and for the first time, Evelyn saw unguarded rage, pure, venomous hatred. Judge Callahan called a recess. The gavel slammed. Court is adjourned until tomorrow morning. The jury filed out, their faces pale, stunned by what they had just heard. As the bailiff led Vanessa away in handcuffs, she twisted once more to glare at Evelyn. The performance was over. The act of innocence had crumbled, and Evelyn knew the next stage of this battle wouldn't just be about facts. It would be about survival. Hers, David's, and the truth itself. The courtroom was packed when the session resumed the next morning. Reporters jostled for seats, jurors filed in with solemn faces, and Evelyn could feel the weight of anticipation pressing against her chest. Judge Callahan adjusted his glasses. The state may proceed. Ade Torres rose, her tone steady but sharp. Your Honor, the state calls Detective Clara Mitchell to the stand. Mitchell testified clearly. The shoebox of unprescribed medications, the estate documents, the internet searches, and finally the leather-bound journal. Each piece of evidence was projected on the screen, each line of handwriting cutting deeper into Vanessa's carefully curated mask of innocence. Detective, Torres asked, in your professional opinion, do these findings indicate premeditation? Yes, Mitchell replied firmly. They show a calculated plan to discredit, poison, and ultimately eliminate Mrs. Evelyn Harper. The jury scribbled notes, expressions grim. Vanessa shifted in her chair, her lawyer whispering urgently into her ear. Gregory Flint rose for cross-examination, trying to inject doubt. Detective, isn't it possible that these medications belonged to someone else? That the documents were drafts, never intended to be used? Isn't it true we cannot prove who wrote in that journal? Mitchell leaned forward, voice unwavering. The handwriting matches the defendant's. Her fingerprints were found on every page, and the medications were hidden in her nightstand, in bottles labeled under aliases connected to her. The defense lawyer faltered, his rhythm broken. Vanessa's jaw clenched, her knuckles white where she gripped the table. When Mitchell stepped down, the prosecutor called the final witness, Naomi Carter. Naomi took the stand, hands trembling, but eyes fierce. She recounted her grandmother's decline, the mysterious pills, the whispers of dementia planted by Vanessa. She convinced us my grandmother was losing her mind, Naomi said, her voice cracking. But she was killing her slowly, and when I saw her again with Mrs. Harper, I knew she was about to do it again. The courtroom was silent, every ear straining to catch her words. Flint jumped to his feet, voice sharp. Miss Carter, isn't it true you have a personal vendetta against my client? That your grief has clouded your judgment? You were 19, distraught. Isn't it possible you imagined her involvement? Naomi's chin lifted, tears glistening but her voice steady. I didn't imagine the pills. I didn't imagine the journal entries. I didn't imagine her face. She was there. She did it, and she nearly did it again. Her words cut through the defense like a blade. Some jurors exchanged glances, their skepticism giving way to conviction. Flint sat heavily, his argument collapsing under the weight of Naomi's raw truth. Judge Callahan turned to Torres. Any further witnesses? Yes, Your Honor, Torres replied. The state calls the defendant herself. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Evelyn's breath caught. This was the moment. Vanessa rose slowly, smoothing her suit, her expression carefully neutral. She took the oath and sat, her hands folded delicately in her lap. Torres's voice was deceptively calm. Mrs. Harper, you've heard the testimony. Do you deny writing this journal? Vanessa smiled faintly. Of course. Anyone could have written those words. I love my mother-in-law. I would never harm her. Torres pressed. Then explained the fingerprints, the timing, the dosage notes that align with Mrs. Harper's documented illnesses. A flicker of irritation crossed Vanessa's face. You're twisting everything. Evelyn is confused. She's always been fragile. Fragile, Torres snapped. Or poisoned. The tension in the room snapped taut. Jurors leaned forward, eyes locked on Vanessa. Vanessa's composure cracked. Her voice rose, sharp and venomous. She was going to die anyway. Old women like her. She stopped, too late. The jury gasped audibly. Ade Torres stepped closer, her voice like steel. Repeat that, Mrs. Harper. Tell this court what you think of Evelyn Harper. Vanessa's mask shattered completely. She leaned forward, eyes blazing with hatred. She's useless. Weak, always clinging to David, always in the way. I gave her dignity more than she deserved. And what thanks did I get? Nothing. The words spilled out like poison, her voice shrill, uncontrollable. David's face drained of color. My God, he whispered. She never loved us. Evelyn's eyes brimmed with tears, not of fear, but of release. The truth was out, not whispered in shadows, not hidden in journals, but spoken aloud before judge, jury, and the world. Torres turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard it from her own mouth. She did not see Evelyn Harper as family. She saw her as an obstacle, and obstacles she removes. The courtroom erupted in murmurs, the gavel pounding for order. Vanessa tried to backtrack, stammering about medication, about confusion, but the damage was irreversible. The jury had seen her true face. Judge Callahan's voice cut through the chaos. This court will recess until tomorrow for closing arguments. As the bailiff led Vanessa away, she turned, her eyes locked on Evelyn with pure venom. This isn't over, she hissed. But Evelyn felt no fear. She sat taller than she had in months, her hand resting over David's. Yes, she whispered, more to herself than anyone, it is over. And for the first time since that birthday dinner, Evelyn felt the weight of doubt lift from her shoulders. The battle had cost her dearly, but the war was almost won. The final day of trial dawned gray and heavy, as though the sky itself bore the weight of judgment. Evelyn sat beside David at the plaintiff's table, her heart steady. No more racing pulse, no more trembling hands. Weeks of testimony had stripped her fear away, leaving only resolve. The jury filed in, their faces grave. Judge Callahan called the courtroom to order. We will now hear closing arguments. Ada Torres rose first, her voice low but burning with conviction. This case is about trust weaponized by a predator. Vanessa Harper infiltrated her family with a smile, while secretly orchestrating the slow destruction of Evelyn Harper's life. Pills hidden in tea, lies whispered into her husband's ear, documents forged to seize an estate. This was not care. This was not love. This was attempted murder. She paused, letting the words hang. And yesterday, you heard the truth from her own mouth. She called Evelyn useless, weak, someone to be removed. You don't need me to convince you anymore. She revealed herself. Torres returned to her seat, the jury's eyes following her. Flint stood, adjusting his cufflinks. His voice was smooth, but it lacked the confidence of earlier days. Ladies and gentlemen, my client is not perfect, but are we truly going to condemn her to life in prison based on bitterness? Based on the words of a grieving granddaughter and a mother-in-law who has never fully accepted her? He gestured toward Vanessa. Look at her. She sits here frail, recovering from the very poison she supposedly delivered. Does that sound like a mastermind, or does it sound like a woman caught in tragic circumstances, blamed because of fear and suspicion? But even as he spoke, jurors exchanged skeptical glances. His words rang hollow after Vanessa's own outburst. The judge dismissed the lawyers. Jury, you may now deliberate. The bailiff escorted them out. The room fell into a tense silence broken only by the shuffle of papers and Evelyn's steady breathing. Hours stretched into an eternity. Evelyn sat still, David's hand gripping hers. At last, the buzzer sounded. The jury had reached a verdict. Everyone rose as the jurors filed back in, their faces solemn. The forewoman stood, holding the slip of paper with trembling hands. On the charge of attempted murder of Evelyn Harper, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. The words struck like a thunderclap. Evelyn's chest tightened with relief. On the charge of fraud and elder abuse, we find the defendant guilty. David closed his eyes, tears sliding silently down his face. Vanessa sat rigid, her lips pressed into a thin, venomous line. For the first time, the mask was gone. No tears, no performance, just fury. Judge Callahan's voice was steady, grave. Vanessa Harper, this court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Gasps echoed through the gallery. The gavel slammed once, twice. Court is adjourned. As officers moved to escort Vanessa away, she twisted suddenly, her voice rising in a shriek. You'll regret this, Evelyn, both of you. I gave you a way out, and you chose misery. The bailiff restrained her, dragging her out as her voice echoed down the hallway like the last cries of a cornered animal. Evelyn sat unmoving, watching her go. She felt no triumph, no vengeance. Only a profound emptiness, like a wound freshly stitched, aching but no longer bleeding. She turned to David, who whispered brokenly, I'm sorry, Mom. Evelyn pulled him close. No, son, we survived. That's enough. In the weeks that followed, Evelyn began to rebuild. She moved into a smaller house near Lake Lanier, where mornings were filled with the sound of birds instead of the echo of memories. She planted roses in the garden, their blooms a reminder that life could grow even after devastation. David visited every Sunday. They cooked together, laughing in a way they hadn't since before Vanessa entered their lives. Slowly, the guilt faded from his eyes, replaced with something stronger, trust. Naomi became almost like family. They met for coffee, and Evelyn supported her dream of finishing her nursing degree. You saved my life, Evelyn told her one afternoon. Now you'll save others. Naomi smiled, eyes shining. Your story gave me courage, Mrs. Harper, and I'll make sure no one else suffers the way my grandmother did. In those moments, Evelyn felt the heavy shadow of Vanessa finally lift. 6 months later, Evelyn stood on her porch, watching the sun rise over the lake. A soft breeze carried the scent of her roses. For the first time in years, peace filled her chest instead of dread. She thought of everything she had lost: innocence, trust, the quiet certainty that family meant safety. But she also thought of what she had gained: strength, resilience, a deeper bond with her son, and the knowledge that her story could protect others. She whispered into the morning air, I am not a victim, I am a survivor. And as the light spread across the water, Evelyn Harper finally allowed herself to believe it. The nightmare was over, and every breath she took, every moment of freedom, was her sweetest revenge.